The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL, but we're the ones who originally invited you to go ahead and like and share this show on your favorite social media and with all your friends and neighbors, because if it's happening on the Treasure Coast, it's happening on the Sue Ellen Sanders Show. In fact, right now, here's your host, the one and only Sue Ellen Sanders.
Welcome to the show, and I'm glad you're here with us today. We're going to be talking about something that as an ongoing issue and has been an issue for very many years. It seems to ebb and flow. Right now, it's definitely at a flow point where people are having issues. And I'm talking about driving while intoxicated or on drugs. And, you know, as our children grow older and drive out on the road and we don't see them every single day, you know, we still sometimes hear sirens, and the first thing we do is text our children and say, hey, you know, I know that was a siren, just checking on you. Or if you want to be subtle about it, you just say, hey, how you doing? But a lot of times that worst possible thing doesn't happen to you, but to Melanie and Tim Trewen, who are here with me today, it did happen to them. And their daughter, Claudia, was driving down Indian River Drive just over 2 years ago when she had a crash, which is an intentionally, describe for me how you, the difference between a crash and an accident. Wait, before we get to that, Claudia did not survive the crash. So sadly, she passed. And the reason Melanie and Tim are here today is not to mourn Claudia. They've done a lot of that. But it's to change the world one step at a time to make sure that other parents and other Claudias don't have to deal with the tragedy that they endured. So Melanie and Tim are here with me today, and Melanie is a former teacher and an old friend and neighbor, and Tim and Melanie and their son Alex actually went to church with us in the past, so I'm familiar with them all. Claudia was how old when she passed?
32.
32.
She was 32. We had adopted her from an orphanage in Guatemala and brought her here as our daughter at age 15. And she and her husband, they had been married 6 years, and they had been trying for a child for some time, and they had just had a baby girl.
Which, as with you, Grandma and Grandpa, that had to be some of the best times in your life, that you knew that your adopted child, who, you know, when you adopt a daughter, it's no different than, you know, especially at age 15, you raised her from a very difficult age into a grown-up, and she meets the love of her life. She gets married. She tries to have a child, finally has this beautiful baby girl, and then tragically passes away in a crash. So
yes.
I know you have a picture there. Let's go ahead and hold the picture.
Yes, this picture is of our first day as a family in Guatemala at the hotel in some of the wee hours. And
obviously, if you're listening to the radio show, you can't see it, but it's a lovely framed photo of a smiling, happy girl and her new family.
Yes. And then we had all those many years together, and her goal was to be the first in her biological family to graduate from college And so we have a photo of her graduation day with her husband, Michael. This was before they became parents.
And here's another lovely photo of the entire family smiling and happy. And, you know, you raise the children the best you can. You teach them to do good and be good in the world. They graduate college. They have gainful employment.
Yes. She was
they
a chef.
They meet the love of their life, and they're on to a happy, productive life as an adult, and then that all comes to a screeching halt. So the organization Melanie and Tim have started is called Remember for Change. So these photographs that we're talking about and we're remembering, they're not just going down memory lane.
Yeah.
There's a reason that you want people to remember Claudia, and there's a reason that you come here, be on the radio, and work hard to promote rememberforchange.org, is because you don't want other parents to have to deal with what you dealt with. Would you mind, and Tim, you know, if you want to talk a little bit too, can you take us back? Would you mind talking about that day that you heard what had happened to Claudia?
Yes. I do want to make sure your listening audience understands that she was going the speed limit. It was a teenage driver who was going twice the speed limit on the wrong side of the road, having just been served, I believe it was 13 or 17 mimosas and mostly alcohol and two
Those bottomless
vodka shots. Yeah. They did not card him. And it was Super Bowl Sunday, and she was just going to get a pizza for her family, and she never made it.
And she was just driving along the road on her side of the road, going the speed limit, when this teenager who is clearly intoxicated from what he drank, and found to be, you know,
yes,
guilty of the intoxication, is driving on the wrong side of the road, going twice the speed limit, and crashed head on into her car.
Yes, Tim had to take the call from her husband.
Tim, you want to talk about that for just a minute?
You're living a day. Each day is unique. And suddenly your phone rings, and you're used to that. But what you're not used to is hearing your son-in-law distraught, asking you to come to the hospital because your daughter, and he's full of grief, and he's very apologetic. And think of that, the apologetic nature of it. I have a protective attitude toward my wife.
Yes.
He has a protective attitude toward his wife, and the worst has happened.
So he kind of feels like he let her down because she
He
wasn't
feels
able
bad.
to. Yeah.
Well, he was at work
Yeah.
He feels
in
bad.
another town.
Right.
It
He
wasn't
feels
like
bad.
he
No,
could
no,
have
no,
done
no.
anything.
Yeah, no.
to-
But I understand the feeling Tim
Now
is talking about.
He's at
yeah.
the hospital
Yes.
talking with a surgeon who is with him making those end-of-life decisions that get made at a time like that. And it was strange. I wanted to reassure him, just man to man, that this is something that was beyond both of us
Right.
to control in all but perhaps the most indirect ways. You know, if you can say, well, if she'd been 5 seconds earlier or 5 seconds later, it would have been something else. But that's now how it happened. Now it's past. So you're crushed, and you start to go into the waves of all kinds of thoughts, and then your life has to go on. You have to keep working. You have to go on. You have all these wonderful people coming and expressing their sympathy, for which we're very grateful. So many kind words came our way, but all you want is for this bad dream to end and to wake back up into a world where you still have your daughter. And that just doesn't happen every day. And this comes back. Now it is something that you go through life's experiences and she comes up. Oh, what if she were here? Wouldn't I have liked to know what she thought about this? All those things you might normally anticipate about with your life with your family going forward, just so drastically interrupted. And it was intense back then, but it still comes back now. And sometimes just as strongly as ever when you realize, when you come into a life situation where, oh, if Claudia was just here now, that would, but she's not. And it's hard.
So we have all that energy, and of course we grieve, and we still do 2 years later, but we also need to have something to do with that energy, with that grief. And it didn't happen right away. We finally called Mothers Against Drunk Driving, MAD, because we didn't feel like we had anybody in our corner. And they hooked us up immediately with a grief counselor who made all of the difference. I highly recommend Mothers Against Drunk Driving for those times in your life like this where you need someone in your corner. And she walked us through the next 6 months, and then she suggested we have a candlelight vigil. And we wanted a name for the candlelight vigil, and that's how we came up with Remember for Change, because we wanted to remember her, but we also, and that's our QR code I'm showing here, we wanted to remember her, but we also wanted things to change. And
you wanted to make sure that no other parent or relative or person under your control had to deal with this type of tragedy.
That's what you want. But we know the truth is, it happens again and again. But one of our board members told us about what's known as a social norms campaign. The American people did this with smoking. We conducted a social norms campaign because of lung cancer, because of all the diseases that went on associated with smoking.
Right.
We started a social norms campaign.
And now it's not socially acceptable to smoke around people.
When I was a boy, smoking was everywhere. Anywhere you went, folks were smoking. It was the thing to do. But over decades, this social norms campaign reduced smoking to what we see it as today, as something a small number of people still do in their freedom as citizens. However, we like the idea of a social norms campaign for American youth, primarily. And it's not only American youth with the problem, but primarily American youth needs some messages. You know, we have American youth say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. We inculcate these words in them. We're proposing that there be some other words that we inculcate in our youth, in their care for each other and those around them, that there's a new boundary, a new way of handling how you approach substances, alcohol, and so forth, and that if you go in that direction, you remember words that oblige you to take care, to stay where you are, let those effects wear off, before you drive, or to use a QR code and get a ride home. Different options to inculcate this awareness of options, that you don't have to prove yourself by getting up from a table and immediately leaving and threatening people's lives. That, I think, we have already been successful with a social norms campaign. I believe joining with many organizations, our law enforcement organizations want to do this, have been doing this. MAD has been doing this. We are a local part of what I hope becomes a social norms campaign as successful as the campaign against smoking.
And bringing it to us at a local level. One of the things on some of your literature that struck me, one of the sentences was where you say, it won't happen to you, period, until it does. And that's the thing, is that everybody assumes, well, I'm not that drunk, or I've just had a beer, and I've just had a few drinks, and I am perfectly fine. But what is a conundrum with drunk driving is one of the first things you lose is your ability to judge situations when you're drinking.
Yes.
And so you may really, really, really think you're okay to drive, and you may really, really, really not be. And so part of your campaign is the people around you,
Good point.
and whether it be the waitress or the bartender or your friend sitting across the table, because one of the things you're talking, Tim, about societal norms, but one of the things that is coming into vogue is the young people who are not drinking by choice. And so what are the chances now that in every group of young people, or in their 20s or even in their 30s, they're drinking legally, but there's at least one or two people in that group that is not drinking by choice, and they can be that person who says, hey, can I see your keys for just a minute? Thanks. And then just takes the keys and says, I'll give you a ride home.
Yes.
Or, goodness, we have Ubers, we have Lyfts, we have so many different options now. Anything is a better
and Fort
option.
Pierce has Freebie, and when they go on the QR code, this QR code actually
And Cliff will
takes
take a
them-
picture of it and put it
Okay.
on.
Takes it to a landing page. We have 3 levels. There's a landing page for the patrons that has Uber, Lyft, Freebie, which is free in Fort Pierce, but we have a larger audience than that, and
Right.
Freebie is elsewhere. And then it also has a button that goes to a mini page that summarizes our website, and then they can go and see the full website. But you're making a really good point that there are very conscientious people out there, and the video showed someone trying to give him a ride, the teenager who killed our daughter. And so
But the
people
other
are
thing that
becoming
happens
more
when you're
conscientious.
inebriated, you're also blustery. You're also, I can do this. You also think that,
Yes.
hey, you have all the power in the world. So it's
Well, let's talk about the test.
okay.
Okay.
This past weekend, we were at the sheriff's departments and local first responders safety festival,
safety festival,
that they
yes.
have near the St. Lucie County
Oh,
Stadium.
I tried that. I
Yes.
did that. I did that at the business summit, the Treasure Coast
So
Business
Oh,
the-
Summit.
you'll look
Put
great
it
with
drug-
those on.
on.
There you go.
They're called Drunk
Yeah.
Busters
Yes.
goggles.
Yeah.
And then what we did is we had for the children, well, and many teenagers and adults wanted to try too, we had a preschool puzzle. So anybody could do
Yeah.
this until they put on the
The
Drug
drug-
Buster goggles. And then if we had had more room, back at our house with some neighbors, we tried walking a line like they do in the field, and I had a number of people come up to us and say, I remember when we did that in high school. And that's one of the things that we're working on, is getting out to the youth. We've talked to Boys and Girls of America, Boys and Girls Clubs, I should say. We've talked to Boy Scouts of America. There we go.
That
And
was just a combination of them.
right. And we've talked to End It, which is local.
Yes.
Yep. I've talked to our superintendent, and we're working on having a number of initiatives. And if I may, what he was talking about the social norms, with the help of one of our advisors, Sheriff Pearson, in St. Lucie County Sheriff. He's a
Deputy?
lieutenant.
Okay.
And
Paul Pearson's son. Keith Pearson.
Yes.
Okay.
And Drug Free St. Lucie, which is part of the Roundtable of St. Lucie County, and our wonderful advisors and board members, we have come up with a pledge for youth and for college-age students. And I can read it off
yes,
if you want.
let's go over the pledge.
And it starts, I won't ride with a driver who has been drinking or using drugs. I'll find an alternative ride. I won't stay in an uncomfortable or dangerous situation. I'll call for help. Actually, it says I'll call or get help. The next line is, I won't drink underage. I will wait until I'm 21 if I choose to drink. I won't ever drink and drive. I will always drive sober and unimpaired.
I'll have conversations with friends and family about not being a victim of substance abuse. I'll encourage friends and family to take this pledge too. I agree to opt in and remain active in this pledge program. I am an agent of change.
And we've been blessed to have the approval of Chief Hobley Burney of Fort Pierce Police. She has read through this and given her approval. And the idea is that when they take this pledge, they can give it to their group leader, whether they're at Boys and Girls Club or their student resource officer, I should say school resource officer at their school. They get to keep the top portion. We have the bottom portion, and we'll later be doing a drawing, but as an acknowledgement of their pledge, we have these wristbands that have the rememberforchange.org website and the reminder that says don't drink and drive. So those are initiatives that are part of our youth program. We have 5 program pillars, and the youth initiatives are under one of those.
So the youth initiatives are just part of what you offer as a program too. And as you said, there are a lot of different organizations that touch on doing some of the things too, and you're just kind of bringing it together as a pledge for the youth and education campaign to remember for change. I just want to take a moment to think about, and if you're listening to the show, think about if this had happened to you, you might take that energy and channel it into hatred or hurting the people who hurt your loved one. But being the caring, feeling, wonderful people that you are, you really incredibly took the high road here and decided instead to make change to help others. And I cannot tell you how much I admire you both for this, because I've never walked in your footsteps, and you probably never thought you would either. And
No.
You never know how you're going to approach something until it does happen to you. What's great about the pledge too is it's all encompassing, because you're having the youth sign it and read it, and then you're asking them to talk to their friends, to talk to their relatives, to be aware. And if they go to the website, they also know the background behind it and read the stories. And Claudia's story happened to you, it's personal to you, but we're at a stage in our life where every day we read about a story that's happened to somebody else. And when we were sitting in the lobby, I mentioned this past weekend in South Carolina, a young bride who was 34, she and her husband were leaving their wedding reception in a golf cart, and an intoxicated or a driver who appeared to be impaired, driving at 3 times the speed limit there, plowed into the back of the golf cart and killed the bride who had been leaving her wedding reception. She was still in her bridal dress, and her husband, her brand new husband, is in the hospital with all sorts of injuries, as well as the other 2 people that were on the golf cart. And this stops whatever is happening in your life. You think that it's not going to happen to you. You hear the stories of it happening to other people, and then you start to go deep down the rabbit hole and realize those other people it's happening to aren't any different than you and I. And the day that it happened, Melanie, to you and Tim, was the day that you realized, and also thanks to the team at MAD, that you could affect, and you needed to affect change because you wanted to make a difference.
Well, certainly at that time, we were going through the stages of grief, and they're not linear, they're cyclical. And certainly there was anger, and then there was self-blame because we had brought her from Guatemala to give her a better life in the United States, and now she was dead. And would she have been dead at age 32 if we had left her where she was? So channeling all of those feelings, I will admit, didn't happen right away. The other people that we have to thank is Hospice of the Treasure Coast. Though she never made it to hospice, she died probably at the scene, if not at the hospital. My understanding, well, I found out from MAD that you don't have to be a patient at hospice to get grief therapy.
Yeah, and the support groups there are incredible.
And that really, really helped. So a shout out to everyone, and to you. We thank you so much for having us, because we want to continue to get the word out, to try to keep this from happening to other families.
At the scene of the crash, honor from this community started to appear right away. People stopped. A gallant man who is a mechanic and car dealer in our community, his name is Morel, got off his motorcycle, saw that Claudia's car had caught on fire, grabbed dirt with his bare hands and extinguished the fire so that would not be her last moments. And then he saw a child's car seat in the back seat. He frantically searched the car for a child, finding there was none. He returned to Claudia's side, and she was pinned in her car. And Morel is of Latin American background himself, and although Claudia had adopted English as her main language. She remembered Spanish. And so this man prayed for her right there in Spanish so that in her last moments, she was having something from the center of her life, from the beginning of her life. There was honor. And that man and his family came to be with us later, sometime later, to have dinner and some time together at our home. And it was one of the most wonderful experiences I have ever had. And these experiences, along with others, along with Rosario, the counselor from MAD, from Kelly, the counselor from Treasure Coast Hospice, and so many people reaching out, the first responders who had the difficult task of taking her out of the car, that so many in law enforcement have come forward to be with us in this. And so how can our response be negative? We must attach ourselves to the honor in this community and say, let's find a better way forward here. Let's join others who have already been going in this direction in doing what we can to bring about a new sense of what's the right thing to do in our society.
I do want to add, just as an aside, Mothers Against Drunk Driving has given Remember for Change its blessing. They are a macro-focused organization on changing things such as getting breathalyzers in cars, changing legislation.
Breathalyzers in patrol cars?
No.
Or in people's cars?
In people's cars.
So people who aren't sure, that mean to do the right thing, but they aren't sure they could test themselves.
Well, their goal with that technology is that your car doesn't start until your
Isn't
breath
that a great
until your
idea?
breath indicates to the technology that you're okay now.
Yeah.
So
That's their campaign.
So if I may, they
Yes.
are doing macro things.
Yes.
And they can't be everywhere all the time.
And
And so they've blessed Remember for Change to be grassroots
Yes.
within our community. So some people have asked me, what's the difference? And there isn't. We are one of the many offshoots of the MAD and SAD and BAD missions that are right here in our community responding to our particular culture.
Well, you're the
needs.
outreach arm. You're
Yeah.
the arm that
Yeah.
actually tells the personal story and touches the personal people and has them sign the pledge.
Well, and MAD has passed something with the help of the car companies. So that is in the future.
That
the
is.
future cars, if they get in and it detects an elevated unsafe level of alcohol, it won't start.
That's incredible technology. And I also have to tell you, we were talking about those drunk buster goggles, and I told you that I had put them on at the Treasure Coast Business Summit, and the group that had them, that was having people try them and then walk a straight line with them on, were the folks from the Bush Foundation. So the bad guys here aren't the alcohol and beer distributors, and they're not always the restaurants and the bars either, although the campaigns to make a difference should reach out to all of them.
Well, if we can address that,
We hold out
yeah.
Yes.
to businesses. Let's use the tool of memory cues to help people know their limits. And Melanie has been out in the establishment, has met with the business community in this area of business.
So these are coasters that Tim and Melanie have.
Right.
Because remember, we're
that's
doing a
cool.
radio show.
Mad doesn't
Yeah.
do these.
Yes.
We do these.
Yes.
This is a local,
Yes.
distinctive thing we do. Those are, I don't know if you can see the eyes.
Well, and we'll let Cliff take a picture and post it on YouTube. So if
Okay.
you're listening to this show this weekend on the radio, what you want to do is go to our YouTube channel for WPSL TV, and then you can watch some of them and see some of the different things, visuals that we've picked up. But these are cardboard coasters that can go under drinks, that are going to bars that people can take, and they have the information just very briefly: don't drink and drive, designated driver, ride share, taxi. And the message that I had said that I had seen on your literature, it's not going to happen to you until it does.
Yeah.
So it's a very simple message, but it's very long lasting. And you are putting another tool in the hands of the people that are sitting around that bar, that are sitting around that table, that are sitting at that brunch and drinking bottomless mimosas. And somebody looks down and sees that and says, well, you know, I'm offering to drive him home, but I have to take the next step. I have to make sure he doesn't get in his car. I need to call his brother or a friend or somebody else. I need to get his car keys away from him. I can do it in a fun and joking way, but it doesn't matter how I do it. I have to do it because it could happen to anybody. And the more touches you have on these things, the people around them, the people themselves, the parents, the family, the bartenders, the waitresses, the more touches that you have, the more chances are that something like this is going to be stopped before it can happen.
We think through our memory cues, through our coasters, we are adopting a positive approach with the business community that serves alcohol, that we are not out to end that industry. However, I'm a professional engineer. Every 2 years, I'm obliged by law to study the ethics of engineering and the laws that apply for the sake of public safety to the practice of engineering. I'll admit to you, when I go through that, it's downright scary how easily I could be taken out of my profession if I do something wrong. You know what? That's a good system for the public. That keeps me honest.
Yes.
That keeps me diligent.
Right.
When I look at other industries, sometimes I wonder if the public might not benefit if we demanded a little more diligence, a little more care in the practice of our business, not with the goal of putting people out of business, but with the goal of public safety and doing better business. I think the industry understands that what happened to Melanie and I does not reflect well on the industry. I think it's very much in their
Yes.
interest
Yes, I'm
to
sure they
not
do.
have these things happen. We can be on the same side, but I think that is part of the social norms campaign, that, all right, use your power to help the campaign. Join with law enforcement, with grief counselors, with first responders, and join the program. And I think the good ones mean this. Join the program to create the social norm that we stay at the establishment if we're drunk. We watch the TVs, we visit with people, we have something to eat, we stay, we let our bodies metabolize that alcohol until it's safe to drive, or we've got a friend there that's going to take us home. And this needs to be the norm in our society. And the tragedy will not go away, but it'll go down. And maybe the trend will be that we feel like our country's doing better now because we're having less of that. And we have other issues like that. Let's take this positive approach. Let's use the memory cue. Let's use the social norm campaign. Let's use test experiences with young people. That's what I did at the festival. I'd invite a young boy to come over and say, hey, do this puzzle. It's easy. And I would time them. I would count how long it took them to do the puzzle. Then I would have them put the goggles on, and they would try. They would say, I can do it. But it would take them longer. Everybody would see it took them longer to do the puzzle. And that was the point. Anything you do when you're impaired is going to take you longer. And when we're driving, we need to be fast.
When you talk about societal norms, I think they're changing already. I think that we've seen a trend already, at least with adults, as far as it's not so cool to get wasted anymore. It's not the cool thing to do. Now, youth, I don't think the message has completely gotten through. And so your plan, your organization, and your pledge is even more important, because Melanie and I, as teachers and having taught in the school system, are well aware that their brains just aren't fully formed yet. And so especially that logic part of the brain for our young people is not completely there. And when you say, what were you thinking? Well, the truth is they just weren't thinking. And when it comes to something like this, having the visual cues, making sure that it becomes something that they have to think about, especially and most importantly if they're young.
Well, and if we may, one of our legislators suggested, local legislators suggested that our passing out the coasters was also a message to the vendors.
Yes.
The responsible vendor to not overserve. Mm-hmm. And there is a trend locally that there's a bar we know of that if the person is not able to stand, as the young boy was in the case of this crash, that they get cut off, and if the patron retaliates by not giving the tip that's deserved the bartender or the waitress, the local establishment will make up the difference in the tip that was lost in recognition of the waitress and the bar.
To recognize and reward the waitress and the bar staff so they don't lose anything from it either.
Right, because a lot of times the bar staff will overserve because they're getting more money, and they want to make sure that everyone stays safe when they're leaving their particular establishment. Mm-hmm. And so they want to give them an incentive to be a responsible vendor. And that's one of the things that was an idea from one of our local legislators. I'd also like to talk about some of our other things that maybe people can do.
Sure.
To
How can we help
spread the word?
Yes, let's talk about that.
We have a number of campaigns going. We do have the 5 pillars where we have education, youth, working with vendors, and all of those are on our website.
And your website is rememberforchange.org.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Rememberforchange.org. And if you can grab my cell phone, I'll talk about the other. It's on the outside pocket. I'll talk about the other pillars. We have 2 campaigns going right now, and just this morning we had DVT Hurricane Shutters of Fort Pierce step forward as a donor matching organization. They will match $250 if we get $250 of donations. We are a 501c3 that will go towards being able to give these coasters to the local establishments, or being able to run off these pledges for use with the youth and with the youth organizations locally.
So businesses and individuals can both donate to help pay for both the pledge cards that you have out there and the coasters that you're getting out to establishments.
And the other thing we also have that's really popular are the wristbands that the students are now, they're trading like trading cards, like Pokemon cards, like baseball cards. We've already gone through about 300.
It's so cyclical because the rubber wristbands were in and then they were out and now they're back
They're
again.
very in, and we have waitresses and bartenders as well as children and teens who vie for them. Back on the 5 pillars we have are the vendors, our outreach to vendors, community, a whole memorial piece where people have reached out to us when they've had something like this happen to them, and then we can direct them to MAD. We're not a psychological or counseling organization.
No, but you can refer them.
And we do. We have a reference place on our website, which again is rememberforchange.org, all one word. Youth and an education piece. So if people want to do the wristbands for the youth, for the wait staff, for themselves, we have a matching donor out there. We also are needing more of the Drunk Buster goggles for our demonstrations. So whatever is
To all the
appealing,
materials, yes.
whatever's appealing to an individual, they can direct it in that direction, and we will be the helping hands in the community.
And people can get all that information at rememberforchange.org. The parents that I'm speaking to, Melanie and Tim Trewin, lost their daughter 2 years ago in a tragic crash, and they have taken that energy, as Tim describes it, to move forward and create an environment that embraces a new societal norm for it not to be cool to drink and drive.
Right.
The word reconciliation means to cause to move together again. And you can feel very isolated after something like this. You can feel very unique because it doesn't happen to most people. But I encourage people to move together again after something like this happens. Another thing that in the first year or first year and a half that I never thought would happen is that Melanie and I met with the parents of the young man who caused the crash and the loss of our daughter. And that time together went as well as it could. It went pretty well. I never thought something like that would happen, and I would say it can. And out of that, we hope there will be things in the future where this young man or young people like him who have been through this experience come back to their younger peers and share their story and say to them, I now have this the rest of my life. Here's how you can have a different future.
Yes.
That he has a future, but that he carries
It's
this with
changed.
him.
It's changed.
It's changed everybody. And all he had to do, all the wait staff had to do was cut him off. All he had to do was accept his friend's ride.
Or he shouldn't have been served to begin with.
Or stay.
Anyhow,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. He was actually supposed to be at a picnic at his
Yeah.
grandmother's. What he's talking about is we do have speakers already, and with Drug Free St. Lucie, we are doing Champions of Change, and that is also going to be on our website.
So you'll be able to link to other organizations that could help too. If you're like me and something like this has not happened to you, but you want to make sure that it doesn't happen to somebody else or maybe you down the road, go to rememberforchange.org and see how you can help. Can you also use volunteers helping to spread the word for your organization?
Yes, please. We're actually looking for youth advisors to do a grassroots campaign in their various schools and youth organizations. We have a number of youth who are helping to advise us already, but they're graduating. And so we need new youth advisors. We also would very much appreciate advisors from other walks of life who can help us grow this fledgling nonprofit. And we're very blessed to have wonderful board members and advisors already, but we're out to learn and grow, and if people think they can help us, we hope they will, and I can give a phone number.
Okay, why don't you do that?
I have a dedicated phone number for this. It's 772-333-1533. That's 772-333-1533, and you can text me at that number.
So you can reach out to Melanie and you can reach out to Tim through her. Also, you can go to the website, and do you have social media?
Yes,
too?
we have Facebook page, Instagram page, and we're working on a TikTok page.
So if you're a young person who wants to help with those things, reach out to Melanie through the website or through her phone.
We need social media expertise, please.
Yes, yes.
Please.
Don't we all? Melanie and Tim Trewin have been my guests. They are the founders of Remember for Change, a nonprofit organization that's a 501c3 here on the Treasure Coast that wants to make a difference in changing societal norms on drinking and driving. Tim and Melanie, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
to WPSL for having us.
Great. We'll see you next week with more. Have a great day.
You've been listening to the Sue Ellen Sanders Show. Now, the show itself airs on the weekend mornings, Saturday and Sunday mornings, about 7:05 a.m. Once in a while, in the 1 o'clock hour over the weekend, and occasionally even sometimes in the 11 o'clock hour. You just got to check it out on the schedule at WPSL.com. Click Programming Schedule. Oh, and another thing, archives of this show are on YouTube. Look for WPSL TV. In fact, WPSLTV.com will take you there. Thanks for listening to the Sue Ellen Sanders Show.